Hi friends, I'm Holly Taylor and I've been playing Baldo the Guardian Owl since release day, and my gameplay videos have been helping out a lot of people who are playing through the game as I do. And I've learned a lot of initial tips that I want to share for anyone picking up Baldo for the first time, since it's a beautiful but fairly difficult game. Please note there may be very mild spoilers included in this video. Tip number 1. If you fall off of a ledge, even a seemingly short ledge, you will get a game over. There's no damage to be taken, so only jump off a ledge if you're sure it's short enough that Baldo will survive. It's best to be patient and look for a ramp or stairs to lead you down instead, or go around the long way. Water is similar. In most water you will drown, however, there are some shallow bodies of water you can wade through. Sometimes this is required in dungeons, and I've even found Dindy, the game's currency, wading through water in the game's starting village. If you want to know if you can wade through it, you're gonna have to take a chance at a game over. Tip number 2. If you have someone in your party following you around, you can simply talk to them to get them to stay put. This can be handy for puzzles and is one of the first things you'll need to do in the game in order to get the owl's horn. Just remember it for the future when you come across a puzzle with multiple switches. Tip number 3, you can't carry items through doors or into new areas of the overworld. Unfortunately, you cannot take the chicken into the backyard through the house, and you cannot carry a pot into a different dungeon room, even if that dungeon room is accessed through an opening rather than an actual door. You're gonna have to find what you need within the room you're in. Tip number 4, Baldo can roll and run to get around faster, but watch your stamina wheel. It's a little hard to notice. It's up in the top left, and it will drain and you'll have to wait for it to fill back up. I usually alternate between running and walking, but as we all learned in Ocarina of Time, rolling is slightly faster and may be your preferred method of getting around. Tip number 5, there is a quick access menu using the D-pad. Use up and down to navigate your tools and the left and right buttons to select a healing item or consumable. Once you have the right item selected within the menu, you then need to press B to get Baldo to hold it in his hand, and then X to actually use it. The game pauses while you navigate the menu this way, but remember that while you're eating something, Baldo is vulnerable to attacks. And if you run or roll, Baldo will put the item away and you'll have to press B again to bring it back out. These are the controls for the Nintendo Switch, so your controls may be different, but the concept should be the same. Tip number 6, you can get an extra heart in the very beginning of the game, which is extremely helpful for the first few dungeons, and I highly recommend you get it as soon as possible, since you won't be getting any additional hearts for a long time in this game. It's the reward for the Callow Cabbage Patch Job side quest, which you can start by talking to Pocan right next to where you start the game. To complete the quest, head down the stairs to the southern part of the village, and then head right and follow the river down to the next area. You just have to wade through the cabbage field and talk to Zira in the water. She'll ask you to use the shovel to pick up 2 cabbages and place them in the holes that you can see in the water next to her. Go back and talk to Pocan, who will give you his extra shovel, and then return to the cabbage patch and find the cabbages on the upper levels to the left and to the right. They look kind of like white pumpkins with a green stem. You'll have to slowly walk all the way with them and then press A to drop them on top of the 2 holes that you see in the water right by Zira. It takes a bit of time, but I promise the extra heart is well worth it. Tip number 7, you're gonna die a lot in this game. Just accept that now. It doesn't mean you're a bad player, it means that the game is challenging and it was honestly designed that way. However, game overs are very forgiving and you'll respawn at your last doorway with 3 hearts. So basically every door is a checkpoint. So honestly, the best strategy is to plan to die often and not worry about healing yourself too much. If you die, you just get to try again. This is only not true during boss battles or rooms with tough enemies you need to defeat to unlock the doors. Then it may be worth using healing items to stay alive long enough to beat the enemies or the boss, but in general, you really don't need to use them. Just die and try again. When you do respawn, any healing items you used between your last doorway entry and dying are returned to you. I'm not sure if the devs intended this or not, and that may be changed in the future, but it's really helpful for boss battles. So keep in mind that for a few seconds while you eat or drink your health item, you are vulnerable to attack, so you do need to find a hiding spot or put distance between yourself and your enemies first. But if you need to use health items and then you die anyway, you should respawn with those health items back in your inventory. In dungeons, it's smart to just start swinging your sword as soon as you walk into a room because rats or other enemies will sometimes come straight at you. The sword's range is longer than it looks, so you don't really have to wait until the enemies are really close to use it. Just go ahead and start swinging. And you can buy cheap shields in the beginning of the game if you have the money, but they take damage and they break pretty quickly, so they're not really worth using until you unlock a stronger shield. If you have extra money though, it doesn't hurt to buy one just in case you need it. Tip number 8, don't plan to rely on the map very much. You can't zoom in on the main map in your menu, and you need to find Minicio, the map maker, and buy each section first. Unfortunately, he's not often easy to access, and I found that sometimes I'm done with an area before I can even get to Minicio and buy the map. And then your mini-map can sometimes be helpful because it shows enemies as big red dots, but it only covers your immediate surroundings and it doesn't do much to help you navigate a new area. And there are no maps in the dungeons. Sorry. Tip number 9, there is no natural time progression in the game, but there is day and night. If you talk to a lot of NPCs, you may hear them mention nighttime, which will be unlocked after the 3rd dungeon. And then I believe there's an inn in Rhodia Town where you can sleep to change from day to night after that. Tip number 10, if you're stuck, there are a few things you can try that just might do the trick. There are a lot of clues on the floor, so look there and you may have to backtrack a little. This is especially true for when you need to move statues or blocks into certain positions or find some sort of pattern. It's usually going to be on the floor somewhere. Also, double check for any doors that you may have missed. In dungeons and dark places, they often blend into their surroundings. And one thing to note here, if you need to do something to unlock the doors in a room, such as killing all of the enemies in that room, all of the doors should unlock, even if the camera pans to just one of them, which can be confusing. Another thing you can do if you're stuck is look for stone blocks or bushes that are pushable. For the most part, pushable things can only be pushed in the direction the game wants you to push it. So if you're able to push something, keep going, you're probably on the right track. And if you're really stuck, you can pay to get hints at the library in Rhodia Town. However, the more important and helpful tips are going to be more expensive. I do know that these tips from the books are all available on YouTube if you don't want to pay for them in the game, but be mindful of spoilers. And if you don't know where to go next, check your quests. And that leads to tip number 11. There is a difference between blue and green quests. Green ones are your standard side quests and completely optional, but blue quests will be required at some point or another to complete the game, even if they seem just like side quests. So make sure you talk to every NPC. You never know when someone will give you a blue quest that you actually need to proceed with the game at some point. Tip number 12, dig with a shovel every time you see a patch of soil. Most of them just hold a healing item or currency, but some have keys or ladders that you need to find. There's also an early dungeon where you need to dig where it's not expected to proceed. Tip number 13, try to gather orbs whenever you can by cutting grass or killing enemies. You want to keep a good supply handy for any owl doors you come across that require orbs to open, and also once you acquire the lantern, which consumes orbs while you're actively using it. You really don't want to be in a situation where you need to open this owl door or you want to unlock a fast travel checkpoint and you're low on orbs, so you need to then run around and try to find them. Try to just cut the grass as you go and collect those orbs. Okay, we're down to the last 2 tips, and these are non-story spoilers for the first couple of dungeons. Tip number 14, you won't obtain the sword until near the end of the first dungeon, so don't think that you just missed it or you need to go find it somewhere else. You'll have to throw pots or skulls at enemies until you get it. And while there are plenty of challenging rooms you can get through with just pots, there are 1 or 2 rooms in that first dungeon that you should hold off on going through until you get the sword. And our last tip is tip number 15. You won't obtain the sacred fire, it's like a lantern or a torch, until near the end of the 3rd dungeon, Savoca Prison. But you'll come across a lot of spider webs in the overworld until that point. It is possible to progress without the fire, even when it doesn't seem like it. Just be patient and try to remember where you want to come back to once you have fire. And that's it. That was 15 tips I wish I knew before I started playing Baldo. What other tips do you have? Share them in the comments and then check out my other Baldo videos if you love this game or need some help.